All right, I'll call the special call meeting of the Henry County Board of Education to order for the purpose of our only agenda item, which is a tax hearing, and I'll turn it over to our superintendent, Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm pleased to open the first of 3 required tax hearings for the Henry County Board of Education. And at this time, turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Christy Willis. Ms. Willis.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Superintendent Davis. I think JD is going to help me with my PowerPoint presentation, getting that up. But as a Georgia public school system, just wanted you to know that our local funding, such as property taxes, are vital to the success of the budget. So it's important to understand the relationship of those property taxes and to the district budget. So JD, we'll go to the next slide, please. So let me tell you what we're going to do today. We're going to do 4 things. We're going to review the millage rate and what that definition is, the types and the impact to property tax. We're going to review the board's role in setting millage rates and our digest history. We are going to review the impact of the adopted millage rates to the fiscal year 2021 investments in student learning. And lastly, we're going to gather community input via these public participations during these 3 tax hearings. We'll forward to the next slide, JD. So what is a millage rate and how do you read it? It's a tax that is multiplied against assessed value of taxable property to calculate the amount of property tax owed. The millage rate is usually stated as dollars per thousand. So the millage rate of 5 mills is $5 per thousand of assessed value. So Henry County Schools has 2 millage rate types. The first is the maintenance and operation, which is commonly referred to as M&O rate. This tax levy generates funding for the general fund, which is home to our daily operations. The second is the bond millage. And much like when you finance your home for long term, school systems finance large capital outlay projects with the sale of bonds. The proceeds of the bond millage repays this long-term debt. The millage rates are established each year by county, city, and school districts. The millage rates are published in a tax digest, which is the document that establishes tax districts and defines property types subject to taxation. JD, we'll flip over to the next screen. Thank you, sir. So the example I'm going to show you here has an assessed property value of $80,000. And that would generate funds for Henry County Schools in the amount of $1,600 at our current millage rate for fiscal year 2021. So it's important to understand that the growth and decline of the assessed property value has a significant impact on the school system's budget. While millage rates may be increased or decreased, the assessed values are equally important. An assessed property value rises and millage rates remain the same. What this will cause is a property tax increase. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights reduction was enacted to prevent indirect tax increases discretely caused by property value growth. And Georgia law requires these hearings and other public notices if the millage rate is not reduced, or what we call rolled back. So our M&O millage rate has been maintained since 2007. So let's look at first the left side of the screen, and you will see from 2009 through 2012, just 4 short years, Henry County's digest plunged almost 36%. It took 6 years for the tax digest to recover and be comparable to a decade ago. We also have to remember Henry County has some of the most generous exemptions in the state. which is partly why our county is one of the best places to live. These exemptions are unrealized revenues for investments in our learners. So let's take a look at the right side of the screen. And this will show you how the value of a meal is so important. Unlike state revenues that are based on consistent formulas for all 180 Georgia public school systems, the county tax digests are not created equal. You're looking at the 10 largest school systems here, and we're combining Atlanta Public Schools and Fulton County Schools. So let's look at the last school system shown, Chatham County. And you can see their millage rate is less than Henry County, which is in the gold. However, the value is higher and it generates more revenue. So going back to the left side, so what does this year's tax value increase mean? So JD, we'll go to one more slide for me if you don't mind. Thank you, sir. The increase is estimated at 6.5% of that rollback rate that I mentioned, or the rate that would generate the same amount of revenue as in the previous year. For a Henry County property owner with a standard exemption of $4,000, the increase will be approximately $8.75 a month, or $105.01 for the year. So local revenue historically made up about 39% of the general fund. So if you're looking at the right side of that screen, you'll see what's happening from FY20 to FY21. Because school systems throughout Georgia are facing declines in state revenue, and our local funding is now more vital than ever. So our local revenue, which again is largely made up of those property taxes, will make up more than 44% of the general fund revenue for FY21. It's our strong local economy, along with your commitment to sound fiscal management. That's what's allowing us to build a fiscal year 2021 budget that will weather the austerity reductions we are facing in state revenue allotments. So the last slide I have for you today is, and I'll wrap up with these three items. The FY21 budget maintains the existing millage rate. Applying the millage rate to a higher assessed property value will result in a property tax increase. You as a board are clear that the budget will be student-centered and our core business of student learning will be the focus. Dr. Davis, that concludes what I have prepared today.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. Mr. Chair, that concludes what we have prepared today. I do believe that now is an opportunity, if any of our attendees are interested in submitting perspective or questions related to the constant rate of the millage, they can submit that in the Q&A feature at this time. And Mr. Chair, we will read for the board anything that is submitted during this time. Mr. Chair, at this time, there have not been any questions or remarks submitted through the Q&A feature. We do remain available for any discussion that the board may have, and we can come back to any questions that may be populated after that.
Does any board member have any questions or comments? I'll ask one question just for clarity. Ms. Willis, this is not a change in millage rate by the Henry County School System, correct?
Correct, Mr. Chair. This is not a change in the millage rate. Our rate has been the same since 2007.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Davis, I think there's a question.
So we do have two questions, Mr. Chair, from registered participants in today's Zoom call. The first is from Ms. Gibson, and she indicated that she's good with the millage rate remaining the same, but how was the property tax increase realized? Ms. Willis?
Sure. Our tax assessor from Henry County actually does a thorough investigation of the properties in Henry County, and Ms. Carty is on the line with me if she wants to speak more to this tax assessor through the Henry County government. But those rates and those items are actually established about January of each year.
One other question received by Ms. Thomas said, how are the funds divided up between all Henry County schools?
Sure, that's a great question. And we're getting ready to have a budget update in a few moments. Through the general fund, about 88% of our budget is personnel, and the other 12% is non-personnel, which is mainly those operational overhead items, fuel, utilities, things of that nature. And as I said before, when you look at the general fund as a whole, typically 44% of that, or now it will be in FY21, will be through that local funding of property taxes.
Okay, we did have one question asking about if our district received funds from the CARES Act, and how much, and was Henry County required to share any of the COVID relief funds with public schools?
So we did receive almost $6 million of CARES thanks to our governor. He did make sure that Georgia school systems were allocated those funds, and I'll have an update for that CARES funding when we bring it to the board as far as those funds, what their use will be for.
And Christy, if I could add to that, I'd like to mention the question was specific to the Henry County government receiving CARES dollars. Your answer pertained to the Henry County schools portion allocated from the state allocation. And so there is not a commingling of CARES funds between those two agencies, but the Henry County schools had the responsibility of appropriately allocating to our private school providers in our community. That is the expectation placed on schools. Thank you for the opportunity to elaborate on that.
Thank you.
The last question right now was, could you please discuss the reduction in funds from the state?
Sure, I'd be happy to. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but because of our local economy as growth, and actually that's what we're talking about here, we were set to lose about $12 million in state funding through what's called equalization grant and local 5 mills. Again, if they can stay on the line with us, we'd love to have them at 4:30 because I'm going to give a little bit of update. But the state, with COVID-19 since March, Henry County Schools is going to have another almost 23 million reduced from our state budget because of the impact to just the state of Georgia through the health pandemic.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. That we don't currently have any further questions at the moment. So Superintendent Davis, I turn it back over to you.
I do see that an additional question related to the allocation of funds to local schools was posed. And I know, Ms. Willis, that's not related to the millage, which is what we are bound to address during the millage hearing. But it is a great question and will certainly be a part of our FY21 outlook. We do have a, the formulaic approach that we allocate to schools. So our millage is for the entire Henry County community. Mr. Chair, that concludes the participation in today's tax hearing. I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Does any board member have any questions or comments before we adjourn this public tax hearing? All right, with no further questions, I will adjourn today's special call meeting for the purpose of our tax hearing number 1.